It's Space Art Challenge Community Showcase thing time! About 2 weeks ago, I asked all of you to do some sort of art of outer space, or something related to that, because I wanted to see what all of you could do. And now, the submissions are in. The first time around with the lightsabers, I merely showed off what all of you had done. This time, I am going to be sharing my thoughts and feedbacks a little bit. Though, keep in mind, I am so happy all of you who decided to submit your entry for this did so, and I very much do not mean to admonish or discourage any of you. Thank you for doing this. Now then, on to the first entry. From Magma Creates, we have this space spray painting, which is something I probably am going to start doing again here soon myself, considering it's finally warmed up enough. I like it. It's a bit more abstract than how I usually do mine, but that's perfectly fair. I like the texture you did on the planet. Looking at it, it seems like you went fully monochromatic with it and used a single can of red paint. If you want to keep doing space spray paints, I'd recommend at least grabbing a can of black. That way you can do a kind of crescent on the edge of your planets to give them the shadow, which will give them a bit of three-dimensionality and make it not look so flat. In addition to doing shadows, a can of black will also help with shaping stuff, doing touch-ups, and if you're not using a already black canvas, it'll let you black out the canvas for the rest of your space. As for your highlight atmospheric shine, when you spray that, if you do it a bit closer to the thing you're using to cap off your planet, it'll be a bit sharper, and it won't poof and blob out quite as much. Then you can take that aforementioned can of black and lightly mist it in a couple spots to help fade it out a bit more. Still, very nice. Definitely better than the first couple I did. Space spray paintings are a ton of fun, and I'm glad you decided to submit one for this. And now, on to the next. Obese Rat 44 gives us their first ever attempt at doing space art. It is pretty abstracted, but I get what you're going for here. I do like your use of complementary colors in your nebula swirls. Now, without knowing what program you use for this, I'm not sure how much of this will be applicable, but using layers, the dodge burn tool, the smudge tool, and using a blur filter are your friends. While it can somewhat vary, using the dodge burn tool set to dodge and a soft brush can generally be pretty good for doing shadows. Same with using the dodge version of the dodge burn to make highlights. If you use it on burn with a more rough speckledy brush, it is pretty good at turning vague color blotches into gas clouds. So, with everything on a separate layer, you can roughly block in where you want your gas dust plumes to be, and then use the smudge tool to smooth them around and have their edges fade off relatively softly. Then you can come in with the dodge burn on a speckledy brush and texturize them to where it looks like a plume of gas rather than just a color blob. And if you mix using the burn setting of dodge burn and a low opacity eraser, your gas layer will become semi-transparent even more, which will allow you to actually have your stars behind your gas plumes, while still being visible through them. For your stars, just use a small brush and don't drag it when you put your stars down, just click it, move your brush, click it, move your brush. Then once you have your star layer, you can duplicate it and then hit it with either a lens or Gaussian blur, and that makes your stars glow. I'm not entirely sure what's going on with your planet, but if you give it that same shadow I mentioned with Magma Creates spray painting, which you can rather easily do with dodge burn, like I said before, it'll give it a lot more three-dimensionality and have it not read nearly as flat. If you want to do an atmospheric haze and lighting effect on the opposite side of your shadow, you can then duplicate your planet layer, give it a strong highlight on the other side, and then blur that duplicated layer, and then partially erase it to where you can see your planet underneath it. Of course, it depends on what program you're using for however much of that is actually applicable. So, thank you for submitting your artwork. I know it can be pretty daunting to do that, especially if you're just starting out. Like I said in the Discord, and this goes for everyone else watching too, don't worry about how good your artwork is in comparison to anyone else. Oh, look at their stuff and try and learn from it, see what you can apply to your own works, of course, but don't ever worry about judging the quality of your work against anyone other than your past self. Just keep going. Do it a little differently each time. Keep what works and keep iterating on it. Little by little with each turn, you'll grow and evolve past the you of before. Soon enough, you'll look at what you've done just a couple of months ago and go, ugh. Yeah, I got way better. And if any of you have problems believing in that, then believe in the me that believes in you, until you can believe in a you that believes in yourself. Anyway, that drug on a little bit. Next submission! We have this Starlit Mountain and Lake by Superbowie, which I will count for this. It's pretty nice. A lot of what I was saying on the last one also applies to this. Layers are your friend. If you split your mountain into 2 or 3 separate layers, your closest to farthest back, you could put some extra layers of mist in between them around their base. And you can pretty much do the exact same thing for your mist that I described with the Space Nebula a minute ago. Just use a bit more of an eraser to make it a bit more transparent. Having them on separate layers will also make it a bit easier to shadow your mountains, at the very least where they're overlapping each other. And if you just want to give it a quick bit of rocky texture, using a scraggly brush with dodge burn set to dodge, you can just click around it kind of wildly and it'll create a rocky pattern. Come back in with the dodge burn set to dodge, and you can make some highlights, if you do it a bit more intensely, it'll make snow, and overall it's a pretty quick and effective way to texturize rock and mountains. I actually really like your stars, especially because I can make out at least one, possibly more constellations in them. But you could still do that same layer duplicate, layer blur to give them that glow. And you can do pretty similar for the moon as well. You can also do a similar thing to how I described for the mountain to give it a bit more texture. But if you don't want to lose that texture, you have your blurred moon layer be behind your detailed moon layer. You might also want to up the brightness on that blurred layer. Going back to your mountains, you want the ones further back to actually be a bit lighter and a bit more blue-ish towards your sky's color. It's called atmospheric occlusion, and it helps give that sense of depth. Furthermore, for their shape, you might want to make them a bit more squiggly. Right now, they're essentially triangles, but if you kind of wiggle your line as you come up to your point and wiggle your line as you come down, and have it be a little bit of a swoop, a little bit of ridges along how it goes up and down, it'll look a bit more natural. Your water's pretty good, but to make it a bit better, you might want to have your highlight squiggles to be a bit sharper and a bit more horizontal than they are now. However, you might want to have a little bit of a landmass shoreline between your water layer and your mountains, because right now the transition between them is a bit abrupt. One last thing is, once you have everything else how you like it, you can make a new layer that's a duplicate of everything, so new from visible if you have that option. You can then flip that layer horizontally, erase everything that's not over your water, and then lightly, partially, low opacity erase everything that is on your water, and that'll create a reflection. Still, very nice, and thank you for your submission. Up next is a bit of an unusual case, because The Watcher wasn't able to upload the video he wanted to post to the Discord. But because I watched The Watcher, I was able to acquire it from him. And to The Watcher specifically, I'm in your walls. Anyway, here's a part of the music video he's been making for the past year. He's still not finished with that, by the way. Apparently there's supposed to be a whole war between different robot factions going on, but he's probably going to spend at least another year or two working on that. Up next, from your local noob, we have this looming black hole. I really like this one. It's heavily stylized, but there's very little I actually have suggestion-wise for this. The only real suggestions I have for this one are getting rid of the stars in front of the black hole, and either splitting the stars that are more lines than orbs, or going harder and making more of the stars into lines pointing towards the black hole for gravity light distortion. Maybe you could give the stars the layer duplicate blur glow I've been talking about, but I don't think this one needs that actually. Stylistically, I think just the flat stars actually work better here. Ironically, because I don't have too much more to say on this one, it's gonna get shown for significantly less time, so do the next one. From my brother, we have this one. And a lot of what I've said before still applies here. I don't know if the program you're using for this one has dodge burn, I can never remember, but if it doesn't, you should still be able to do something similar with some kind of scatter brush and just using a low opacity black to make your nebula gas. Can you tell I've been talking for a while? Turn into something more than just the swoopy color it is at the moment. I would also recommend going in a bit harder with the shadowing on your planets, and that same layer duplicate blur thing I've been talking about to give your stars the glow. But I would also suggest adding in a few larger stars here and there as well. Maybe also bring a bit more of the pink of your nebula over your, I'm assuming, star down at the corner, or otherwise make that high intensity white area a lot smaller, but otherwise very nice. Finally, we have my sister's submission. Again, very nice. I'd still say do a bit more shadowing on your planets, and a bit of that either dodge burn or low opacity black on your nebula galaxy arm swoosh, and maybe a few more stars, again using that whole layer duplicate, layer blur thing I've been going on this whole time about, but I do like it. Especially that one planet that kind of looks like a pearl. However, for lack of a better way of putting it, your gas giant looks wet. You need to tone back on your highlight with it a little bit because it looks less there's light hitting it and more this is a wet reflective surface to me. So, thanks for participating in this. To all of you who participated in this, thank you. It is genuinely a joy to see what all of you can do, and hopefully maybe lend a hand here and there. Now then, to you the viewer, which did you like better? Is there anything that particularly stood out to you for one of these submissions? And would you like to participate in one of these Art Challenge Community Showcase things? If the answer to that is yes, your prompt is monster. And the deadline for the next one is April 1st. Hopefully, I will see you there. Oh yeah, the call to action. Like and subscribe.